So welcome, I'm Joy Rosenthal. I'm the president of One Breath Rising, and it's great to see everybody, or to see your names at least. We're so glad to be able to continue the series on Zoom, and we're thrilled to have Anton here with us today. There are just a couple of quick housekeeping things I want to mention before we get started and before I turn it over to EJ, who's going to introduce Anton. First, this is a One Breath Rising event, and we want to thank our sponsors who are Poets and Writers, Park Slope Civic Council, the 440 Gallery, the Garner Glazer Fund, and most particularly our individual donors who just, I mean, that's where the bulk of our funding comes from and make it possible, but also for the people who come to the events and let other people know about it, and to the artists that we've been able to present. It's really been a stellar group that we've presented over, what is it, 5 years maybe?
Yeah, I think this is the beginning of year 5, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really tremendous, and we've really just, it never ceases to amaze me how talented and creative and brilliant and funny and warm the community is and the artists are that we present. I quickly just want to mention next month we're going to have a poet named Kathy Engel, November 8th. So it's the second Sunday of each month usually. And in December, we're delighted to have J.P. Howard, who's actually on the call with us today and who's really one of our own, feels like. And I'm gonna, as we get going, I'll put the donation link in the chat. And so we ask for a donation of $10, but of course it's all whatever you can do, whatever you feel comfortable with. And we're gonna, once we get started, mostly everybody's on mute anyway, but most people will be on mute. And Anton has agreed to do a question and answer afterwards, so stick around. And I think that's it from my end. And so I'll turn it over to EJ Antonio, who's on the board, and she's another founding member of One Breath Rising, and she'll introduce. So have a wonderful time. If you have any questions, feel free to chat them either to everyone or to me or EJ. And there we go.
So hi, everybody. Oh, good afternoon, and thanks for logging in to our reading today. I met Anton several years ago now, and I knew him as a fiction writer, and he joined a poetry group that we became known as the Hot Poets Collective at the time. And it turns out that he's a fabulous poet in addition to a fabulous fiction writer. So you're in for a real treat this afternoon. So I'm just going to read you his short bio, and then I'm just going to turn it over to Anton, and you're just going to have a lovely afternoon with his wonderful words. Anton Nimblett is a Trinidadian who lives and writes in Brooklyn, New York. He is the author of the short story collections, Sections of an Orange, and his newest book, Now After. His fiction and poetry have appeared in several literary journals and in the anthologies Our Caribbean, War Diaries, and the Peepal Tree Book of Contemporary Caribbean Short Stories. Anton presents his work widely in the US and internationally. So we are definitely in for a treat this afternoon, and I'm turning it over to Anton.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, EJ. And I really have to thank the entire organization at One Breath Rising. Being a part of this reading today means I'm a part of this great organization. I can just look at being bookended by EJ reading last month and Kathy Engel next month, two powerhouses of their own. And then I look at the website and I see people I love and adore, their work and their person, Cheryl Boyce Taylor and Mervyn Morris as well. So thank you guys for allowing me to be part of this. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you to everyone for signing in. And I will say at the start that I am wearing pants. So I know a lot of people do crazy things, but I'm not doing that. I'm gonna be reading off the computer. So the first one, I'm gonna start in Brooklyn. And this is a piece that I wrote as an exercise. It's called Soul Summit Gazel. Soul Summit Gazel. Come together one Sunday on a hill in this Brooklyn. Fort Green's oaks and elms and sycamores hold bliss, Brooklyn. When the soul scales to summit, music pumps life, and my aging body flexes limber, near youth. Nothing amiss, Brooklyn. That winding woman's gold bangles send song soaring through trees, her moves so smooth with the house music grooves. That's my sis, Brooklyn. The Rastaman's dashiki flashes new leaf green, dandelion yellow, sunset orange. Don't blink, brother. Don't miss Brooklyn. Embrace the crowd. Find long lost friends. Laugh, dance, shine, live, and love here, Anton. Flex, play, flash color, and kiss, Brooklyn. And so the next piece I'm gonna do, there's this cool thing that I think EJ is behind this in the announcement for this event. She posted some lines from a poem that I hadn't thought of in years. And that was a real treat for me. So I'm gonna read from that poem, and it's called He for Me. I don't care what he looks like. I know beach, fruit, tree, bird, flower, time of day, rhythm, melody. I know Las Cuevas Bay, tucked farther along North Coast Road than Maracas Beach. Quieter, water even warmer, fisherman quaint. Chenet, verdant shell over silken sunny pulp, orbiting a globe of seed like Saturn rings. Layers of round, hard, soft, hard. Heel be East Coast coconut palm leaning back toward Africa, unfazed by distance or time, strong from growing into steady winds. Kiskadee singing reclaimed French Creole, strong clear harmony with rustling leaves, flashing unpredictable in flight. He'll be Exora, firework cluster of tiny blooms. He'll be scent of Christmas ginger beer, the final minutes before a painter's sun sinks below horizon. He'll be driving iron section, not sharing Gael of shiny bass steel bands, Juve Mo, leading footsore mass men the last lap before Lent. Yes, and I'll be Calypso, shadow, bassman. And so that poem took me back, and it took me back to another one, kind of staying in the same vein, thinking about relationships and failures and successes and things we try to make life work. This one is called Featherweight. Chris, you're on the call. I'm calling you out. At any rate, Featherweight. Imagine he turns to you for comfort, returns to the abandoned nest to lay his head in your lap. As you stroke without touching fused wing bones, without remembering them break? Imagine that in this holding, you cannot feel yesterday's rend, still see him fly to another, leaving a shitty nest behind. Imagine your mother did not sing this to you in the cradle. If I had wings like a dove, I would fly, fly away. Imagine you were never a boy confused by folk song tales of brown-skinned girl, stay home and mind baby. Imagine your mother leaving, or the weighty woe of her staying. Imagine a boy glad and guilty. Take me, take me, take me down to Lossy Road. Imagine he will stay with you always, clean and refeather the nest. Imagine you will fly in tandem over Lossy-Row waves, harmonize calypsos on the sand. And while you imagine, touch fused bones, hear the breaking, remember the songs, unravel choruses, and honor your mother, weigh a single fractured feather. And so there's this thing that I feel I need to say, and it's something that I've said a lot over my life. That line about honoring my mother is true and important and priority to me. And she and I have both had a hard time over the past few months, but poetry is this beautiful thing that helps me heal, and we've used poetry to get together, and there's a poem I wrote that she loved, that she read, and so I thank my poetry community, my writing community, many people who are here today, and I celebrate, again, organizations like One Breath Rising, and this is, Joy didn't mention her husband, Darrell Allianz vision and project and passion, and that matters in the world. It matters in our lives when we struggle to make it through. So honoring my mother through poetry, I'll continue. Going back, as I said, EJ took me back to those two poems, which were really, I enjoyed reading them. They were sweet and things that I care about in terms of love and relationship. But I also went back to a couple poems that I found, which sadly are still really relevant, and they read like if I read them today, if I wrote them today. So I'm gonna do two of those. And the first one is called America First. American terrorists hold office, wear uniforms, badge or hood, crew cut or shaved head. American terrorists carry burning torches or nightsticks. American terrorists upend constitutions, flaunt law of the land, never meant for original landowners or 3/5 of men or women. American terrorists are clean cut, like colonialists or colonizers, resolute like empire builders, imperialists, or, well, terrorists. American terrorists love guns more than God, property more than people, or peace. Let's wage war on terror. America first. And this next piece I wrote, and I'm glad like the computer saves dates, and I actually titled this December 2015. This poem is about crisp December air and dulled solstice sky, a stream of red tail lights on a Brooklyn street. This poem is about the sculpture bare trees carve in orange streetlight, gray shadows cast on East New York sidewalks. Were it noon, this would be a poem about clouds and pigeons flying cursive formation over low roofs. If it were summer, this would be a poem about green grass and blue sky, about color and light, nature and city sprawl. This isn't a poem about Tamir Rice because no poem is about Tamir Rice only, but must be one in a sequence, link in a chain, drop in a trail of tears, red dot in a strand of city lights, one rivulet in a trail of blood. Not a poem about the toddler who falls on the East New York sidewalk beneath light-carved trees, rises and runs on little feet over harmless gray shadows beside a woman with a gentle voice. This is not a poem about boys and mothers, possibilities. If some held sway, this would be a poem about anger and fighting, about feeling either powerless or emboldened by outrage. If some had say, every poem I ever write or breathe or spit would be rage. I, incapable of feeling, crisp December air under a solstice sky. And so we were talking about memory a little bit, and I mentioned Mervyn Mars, who is an amazing Trinidadian poet. He has 2 new collections out right now, which, you know, everybody does that. You just, you know, have 2 new collections. If you don't know him, check him out for sure. But this poem is called Spatial Memory, and it's after Mervyn Mars. Late for work, I search for dental floss, find it tucked on bathtub rim. But in my mind, I saw the tub first. The small plastic box happened along. Later, dressing, I walk to the kitchen, stop at the sink's edge, unsure why I came. Stand in the space, reach then for my phone on the counter. My memory works this way now. I retrieve things by locus, position. So kiss me here, not in this time, but in this place, lest I forget you. So I promised, I promised to read fiction and poetry. So EJ mentioned that my new collection of fiction is called Now After. And Ella already gave a shout out to my my shirt for today, which is the cover of the book, Now After. So I'm gonna read a couple of things from that at different points, but this one is called Observing, and it's, there are short stories in the collection with shorter pieces as interludes in between each standard length short story. This is one of the shorter pieces, and it's called Observing. This is how he observes Pentecost. In a throng of strangers standing before glass doors, beneath the sprawling electronic scroll that alternates from liquid crystal increments of time to flat commercial messages. He ignores the ads, compartmentalizes the time. Pentecost. That morning at his mother's church, all the women wore red dresses and hats and scarves, red shoes. His father wore a red tie. He didn't need to be there to see it. He almost watched a televised sermon from the Vatican, listened instead to Facebook and email and texts. In the crowd to the left near the door stands a young Latino whose smile would be as radiant, he thinks, even without the perfect gold grill. A little girl with a head full of old-fashioned plaits announcing Caribbean heritage, each braid secured and adorned with pink and white plastic baubles, form and function in equal measure. The girl's father in blue denim, blue shoes, holds her hand, glancing back. At the window to the west, the pretty lesbian black baseball cap frames her face, secures her own ponytail of locks, mirrors his, he thinks. There are other people, of course, other colors, pairs, and groups. There's a general murmur that an orderly crowd makes, the orchestral counterpoint of separate souls with the same desire. Then there's a single, louder, disparate voice, one man making himself heard, proselytizing perhaps, or engaged in a domestic dispute, possibly mentally ill. He can't quite tell. In this city, none of those options is more likely than the next. Suddenly, those words, God saith, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Delivered as if by a trained actor on stage, as though they were words said for the first time ever, as if they have not been inscribed and transcribed, transmuted, translated for millennia. Whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. This is how he celebrates Pentecost, saying these words louder than the man at the far edge of the crowd, neither disputing domestically nor proselytizing. No, he's not psychotic, he will insist. He speaks these words because the alternative is to succumb, to be drawn as a rock to the bottom, to the pull of the life that has called him more insistently, more loudly with the passing years. The hermit's existence, a swirl about him like an evil eddy. He feels the undertow of water, but calls out for fire. So Pentecost is, not so well-known observance perhaps for non-Christians, but there's fire. Fire, and that goes back to things like the fire next time. So I'll go back to a poem. And let me just bear with me a little bit, guys, as I scroll through. The next poem is really a new thing for me. New in the sense that I haven't often written about my work. For the past 13 plus years, I've worked in the shelter system in New York City. I worked 10 years with domestic violence survivors, and I currently work with families in need of shelter. And people have always asked me when I tell them what I do if I write about the women and families and people I work with, and I haven't before, but this is the first time I've done that. This one is called Odina's Castle. We build our own castles, invent fortitudes for survival, carved from stone walls and commands, straw roofs and fairy tales, climbing ivies and debris, cardboard crates and needles. We build castles, fashioned them from scraps and fear, from brittle scars, dry bones and wounds, from hope, from naked need. Ramshackle claptrap castles rise from pyres and compost heaps. We sit them brazen atop cliffsides or defiant in cockpit country marooned, in a window corner office, feathered, or under a do-rag spitting reason and rhyme. Inside muscle body stretching toward perfection, or behind hologram smiles, razor-edged teeth. Once Odina's castle fell, ineffective, lacking. Her 1-year-old daughter died, lay cold and blue in a shelter-issued crib. She and a 4-year-old left asking how and why, left answering and answering, answering behind faces bared of everything except drying snot and fresh tears. After her castle fell, they moved her to a different address, still not hers. She built a new castle out of necessity. No drawbridge, no windows, only cold, cold fear, flying buttresses of rage. Odina locked inside, distant, impregnable. And we stand outside, useless. And so while that is not necessarily someone's specific story, it's, you know, there are a lot of stories that I see. And the things that I see also remind me about the things that I do and that we all do. And I really believe we do that castle building thing. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna read, how am I doing with time? I think I probably have a good 15 minutes, yeah?
Yeah, it's fine. It's 5:12 now.
So I'm gonna read this, I'm gonna read a poem and then I'm gonna read a longer piece from the collection. This poem, I read it for an event a few weeks ago, and I think it's my favorite poem. Is one allowed to have a favorite child, a favorite poem? I don't know, but it's gonna be like a signature piece. And it makes me think of my father, and that's always a good thing. My father gave me 3 names, one to be used by his family, the second by my mother's. I never used the third. The third name was Passage, Gateway. The third was Entreaty, Contract. The third name is Voice Whispering. You need names for a monogram Daddy carves into your pencils because you lose every pencil you take to school every day for 2 weeks. A name to let your mother's mother tar the distance between her and Daddy. Seal lines sharp as ruts between rows of cane, even after the blaze. A name for your passport, one for your report card, one to use as an initial before the other when you go to college. A new name from Catherine, who taught you too much about partnering, raised the bar too high for men to climb. A name for the man in tracks who didn't hear your name when you said it the first time over the house music flame. A name for your work friends, a name for friends at new work, another for your next job, two for the school where you'll teach. One for the students, one for the staff. Get a name for the phone, one for email, one for bills, one for the boyfriend sites, and a nasty one for the nasty sites. Two for the man you love for 6 months. Only one can be uttered in public. The other is profane, but must be written holy, a dash in place of the vowel. Get a battery of names for the man you love forever, a flight of names, a pride. You waited this long for him to allow time to assemble and invent a name for each season, for rainy days and snow, names for new moon nights, and one for Halley's Comet's return, just in case. Names for when you make him mad and make him mad again. And a name when he's mad because he fell for your makeup poem. Save a special name for when he makes you cry. You love him, of course you'll cry. Don't accept a name from a stranger in an airport who calls you out your name. Instead, return 12 names in 13 languages until her ears ring and her tongue hangs. Don't take your name in vain. Don't take your name for granted. Don't take your name on a slow boat or on a road paved with good intentions. Take your name to church on Christmas Eve, bathe it in mud on South Key on Juve morning. Take your name on interplanetary voyages launched from a copse of ewes in Fort Greene Park. Take your name to the river, wash it in the water. And if no one knows it, tell them your third name is first in a list as long as time, hot as burning cane, pure as holy water. So I'm gonna read something else from the collection. And I keep cutting off the top of my head. Sorry. I'm gonna read something else in the collection. This is from a story called Perseverance Village, which I definitely sort of kind of dedicated to a dear, dear friend of our family, our cousin Ernest, just because it makes me think about stories he told, and he told wonderful stories. And the only thing you need to know it's about the story so far is, as we pick it up here, there are 4 main characters. Errol is the storyteller, and he is in the scene with Dax, with Dax and Alex, who are 2 younger fellows, and he's an older fellow. And there's a 4th character who is referenced, who is someone that Errol knew 45 years ago and hasn't seen in 45 years. And it's set in Trinidad. 45 years later, on a night of unexpected bumps and turns, Errol Isidore will finally speak of that August holiday in Perseverance Village. Routinely, Errol drives Alex and Dex home from the avenue. The drive has developed into a second line, an after party, the VVIP. The boys tell stories about their night. but that night had veered off track, racing as if toward disaster. And if disaster is too strong a word for the loss of friendship, then on a direct path toward whatever one can call the shattering of something delicate, something fine and rare. The first turn, Alex suggested a drive to Lady Young Road Lookout, a last-ditch effort to save the night. On the avenue, Dev and Alex had picked at each other all night, had pushed and shifted like charged metal rods laid with their poles side by side. Worse than a quarrel, because at least with a proper quarrel, there's focus, definition. Instead, a deepening, prickly discord followed them from the club and hazed the air in the car. Alex wanted a little more time, a little night breeze to try to salvage the evening, at least offer some possibility of repair. Dev responded with a loud silence. Alex then suggested the ferry landing instead. Dev said to Errol, like, this man want me to get killed or what? Ferry landing this hour of the night? Like, he expect you as a big man have nothing better to do other than watch he grovel, haze, and more quiet. And he must be planning to grovel, fix what he unfix. Like, he feel you want some jollies watching the two of we kiss and make up or what? Like, this man feel you don't have nothing better to do? Sharp turn. Dev was nervous. The night had gone so far afield, he was unsure himself how to fix what had come unfixed, unsure how much needed fixing. So his humor was way off the mark, his words poorly aimed. The haze didn't allow either of them to see clearly what lay ahead. For his part, what Errol heard was speculation about his own love life. What Errol felt was that the boys hadn't really seen him the way he wanted to be seen. This was an emotion rare to a man with a carefully crafted life, a life lived behind carefully erected walls, surrounded by a carefully filled moat. Call it hurt, call it a turn. Errol Isidore could manage speculation. He'd been the target of speculation about his love life, his sex life, for what seemed like his whole life. He'd sometimes wondered whether such speculation was a factor in his being shipped off to Auntie May in Perseverance Village all those years ago. Were that the case, Errol would never need to get a lesson in irony. Where the problem arose in the boys' talk was not speculation, but assumptions, the idea that he was spending time with them out of a lack of choice, missing a key distinction, preference versus a lack of options. The next turn. At the roundabout by the savannah, instead of veering right to continue on Maraval Road, Errol stayed in the circle, past St. Clair, past Maraval Road northbound. Errol stayed in the roundabout, holding on to the steering wheel, each of the three leaning slightly. Stayed in the roundabout, past the southbound, turning on the roundabout when they hit St. Clair a second time. Three men on a winding road with a fine, rare, fragile thing hanging there in the car among them. Errol drove west, not talking. The boys quiet too. Traffic lightened. Errol drove on in the quiet. On the western main road, St. James went by fast enough on the turnoff for the Diego Martin Highway. Still, no one talked, and the tires rolled. No one talked until they hit Carenage and Dev made a bad joke about driving into the sea. Alex glared. Errol stoops, a long, hard kiss teeth, punctuation mark. When Errol finally pulled to a stop by the Shag boardwalk, Dev spoke again. Where Alex, you asked the man for a view. There was a half dozen cars around, couples, of course, and then there were these three men. There was a cloudy sky, clouds and layers of clouds, choppy clouds pretending to be surf flowing in waves. There was a moon sometimes between these tidal clouds. There were these three men at crossroads. When Errol finally spoke, it wasn't to tell the boys they'd offended him. It wasn't to strike back from pique. When Errol finally spoke, he told them about a time 45 years before when he stole his aunt's gold bangle bracelet. What it would take to get a man to remark on the remarkable 45 years later. Consider how the remarkable functions like water in the earth, how it springs to the surface from an underground aquifer older than man, how it carves rock, pushes sand and silt, curls and bows, falls in cataracts like drapery, finds its way, how it rushes back to shore in waves. Start with that. You ever teeth anything? Errol asked the boys. Not a sweetie or a ballpoint pen from the bank. He doesn't wait for an answer. You ever know somebody you would thief for? Thief something important for? Errol tells them about Auntie May's gold bangle bracelet, the simplicity of an early morning grab from the jewelry box, about walking with it in his pocket, smooth, round metal against cold, almost cold against his fingertips, the slight tug against his leg as he walked, picturing and altering the imagined picture of when he would take it out and present it. Errol tells the boys about the separate, secluded shade of a green bamboo clearing at the river, of how the bangle slipped onto David's small wrist, how it looked there, what it made him feel. Teeth, he says. Teeth. The clouds play their surfing game. The moon disappears, leaving a sky that just glows. Then she reappears in her own sweet time, brilliant, bright. She insists on basking in her reflection on the bay. Errol is a good storyteller. It had young fellas before Dev and Alex. That is all I saying. Fella who never have the chance to argue and fuss, but a little stupidness on the avenue. So the big joke is Mr. Errol is the watchman, The watchman. Hear what Mr. Errol really like to watch, what Mr. Errol want to see. I want to see when people don't take nothing for granted. Life too full of turns. Errol talks and the clouds surf and the moon preens. Fellas, I don't know, I know what's supposed to be, but once upon a time, I did teeth my aunt gold bracelet. And in truth, if I had a next chance, I would do it again. Just for the one time in my life when I feel how I feel when I gave David that bracelet under the bamboo. The moon, the surfing clouds pause, listening. Yeah, I would do it again. Yeah, I feel real bad after. I try to fix it after, save up and save up, find a jeweler to make back a next one same way, but it didn't happen. Sometimes after don't work. We don't know, You can never know. His story does everything he sets out to do. Captivates, educates, opens wide a heart, a mind. The prickly haze that Alex and Dev brought all the way from Aripita Avenue to Chagaramas shifts into the salty night breeze. And maybe because they are by the sea, and because the moon is surfing on clouds, the story opens Errol's own heart too. If the night is right and the story is good, it can do much work. Thank you. Thanks. I'll stop there. Thank you all for listening and sort of, giving me energy even virtually.
Yeah.
Wow.
Snaps and claps, snaps and claps.
Yeah.
Great on time. You're fantastic, Anton. So great.
Thank you. Thanks, JP.
And just so you know, Anton, I'm stealing that fractured feather.
You're more than welcome to steal stuff from me. Like I said before when we were talking, I've learned so much from you, EJ. So yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for coming this afternoon. If you have a question you'd like to ask Anton, you can unmute yourselves, unmute your mic and ask away.
I'd like to ask Anton, first of all, thank you. That was tremendous.
Hi, Dana.
Yeah. When are you going to publish those poems?
That's a big question.
You have a lot of them. They're
Some of
very
those
good.
poems, thank you. Some of them are in that piece that you've heard me talk about, the Courier poem. Dana is a dear friend and a former cohort at an MFA program at St. Francis College. And so she's seen my work before. So some of the poems appear in that Courier poem piece. And I'd like that to be staged when there's a time when people stage stuff. And I don't know, about a collection. Something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Really good. Thanks.
Thanks.
And everybody should know, Anton joined the Poets group many years ago. And we act, like I said before, we became Hot Poets Collective. But he's just as great a poet as he is a fiction writer. and we've been trying to steal him over to the poetry side, but he hasn't moved over that way yet.
It's so easy to steal me because the poetry community is so beautiful. It's so
Abby, you got a question?
Yeah, I just like to say that listening to the prose and poetry together today, I sense how poetic the prose is. I mean, I think, I mean, the imagery that he gets with his prose is very poetic, and there's a mix there. It's an extension of the poetry, I feel. I mean, that's the way I responded to it. I loved it. Thank you so much. But I do have a question about the differences between, I had a dear friend years ago. He's probably a Trinidadian poet, Duad Phillips.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
yeah, and of course he was an editor for the Daily Challenge in Brooklyn, so he also always wrote prose as well. But I asked him this question years ago about the challenges between when you write something on the page and when you know you're going to express it orally out loud. What are some of the things that you know, for instance, today you were preparing to read this, you read your work, and so what do you, and you wrote it previously, so I don't know if I'm articulating it correctly, but I just want to know what's your process of in the writing process and then performing, so to speak.
No, great questions, and thanks for the observation as well, Abby, about the sort of like crossover between the
Mhm.
poetry and prose. Um, you know, I sense a creative there. I can tell when how someone asks a question, how they think about the world and creativity. So thank you for that observation. For me, again, there's crossover between the writing and the performing, right? I've come to realize that I'm never done with a draft if I haven't read it out loud. Um,
Oh, okay.
um, it you just see the language and you see you know what's working and what's not working so much better. At least for me, and I mean many other writers have said this too. Once you read it aloud to yourself. So that is how it goes in this direction. And then in terms of preparing to read it, um, it's a little bit different every time for me. For me, it's more about sort of like what I have to do for myself, get over the my issues with my voice. I've long had complexes with my voice that I've had to get past, and the comparison to others because you know, we live in New York. I live in New York, and there are these amazing spoken word artists who come with their pieces memorized and they perform them in amazing ways. And I've had to like remind myself that the way I perform my piece and my work is of value and there's space for that.
Yes.
And I've been welcomed by people who let me have the chance. And I enjoy and remind myself that I enjoy reading it. You know, I was a kid in school and, you know, in primary school, and I was glad when the teacher called on me to read because I like it. So I remind myself of that. And that's a big part of my process.
Thank you. That's great. That's a great.
Real talk, I'm, you know, transparent. Nothing else.
Hey, Anton.
Hi, Stacey.
Hey, I've worked with Anton with St. Francis since day one, so I've been knowing his work like crazy. And I know Dana already talked about the poetry part. Are you going to be working on another fiction one?
So, yes, Stacey's another dear friend and a cohort at St. Francis. Um, I'm working on something I started the last time we were together, a novel of, so and by working, I mean should be working. um, yeah, but there's a novel I'm working on set in New York, and spoiler alert, the main character is a poet.
Oh,
Ah!
oh, really?
So it all comes back.
Anybody we
Yeah,
know?
fiction, EJ. But yeah,
What's
you know
it?
they say write what you know, right? So the thing, when you just
Uh-huh.
say she tries to steal me, I'm stolen. Like it's in my mind. This is the poetry community is something I feel passionate about, and so it makes sense that that shows up in a novel I tried to write.
Ah. Are you having a hard time switching from the short story to the novel?
I have avoided the novel like the coronavirus. I've
Mm.
avoided the novel like a big orange man with crazy hair. Uh, but I I'm approaching the novel like I'm approaching the chapters like short stories. That's part of my process. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's
Anton, how do you decide when you're going to write a poem or a short story? How did you decide to write the novel?
yeah, that's a great question, Joy. Poems, I mean, of the many things I like about writing poetry is, you know, it's so much more accessible to do in a contained space, in a contained time frame, and to so poems usually come to me more urgently. Um, some of the things I read today, like the poem about Tamir Rice walking down the street. So that literally like comes to me as I'm walking down the street, and it's what's been happening in the world, but it gets sort of crystallized in a moment and in a poem. So it's easy for me to make that decision that that piece is going to be a poem. The things that are stories tend to be just a little bit more interpersonal, interrelational between characters and the world. And the novel, I'm trying.
I have another question too. I put a link to the book to Now Then at Peepal Press, but then I noticed that it's in pounds.
It's in pounds, yeah.
So is that
So
a good way to buy it, or what's the best way to buy it?
it is a good link to buy it. For the longest time, I resisted sharing that, but they are wonderful. They ship stuff out very quickly, and they just do the conversion. They do the conversion.
Right.
If you pay, of course, you're paying by credit card, so they do that conversion for you, and it's generally about 1.5 to 1.5 US dollars to a pound. So you'll see that too. It's a smooth link, yeah.
Okay, I'll send it right now again. Okay, great.
Thanks. And for folks who are in New York, I have copies as well. That's a good way too.
Oh, good. Your writing is so colorful and there's so many images. It's really, it's kind of sparks the imagination.
Good. I like sparking imagination. I'm happy with that.
Well, are there any more questions? If not, Anton, I want to thank you on behalf of One Breath Rising for reading for us this afternoon. It was wonderful hearing your work, your new work, your older poems. Although I know you got some newer poems sitting in there hiding somewhere. And let us know when you figure that you have a nice sizable chunk of your new novel written, and maybe we could have you back to get a preview of what it is that you're writing about, because I really want to know if I know this poet.
Yeah, there are going to be some things that I might have you fact checked for me before. But
Okay.
I would absolutely love to come back. Yes. Thank you so much.
So thank you. And thank you everyone for dialing in today and streaming in, and any way you could get on. Thank you very much for doing it. We're trying to keep this going. Give writers, a venue that they can share a nice chunk of their work so you can get an idea of what they're really about. So thank you very much. And I'm gonna turn it back over to Joy for any last words, if we have any, or announcements or anything like that.
No, make sure to join the mailing list so we can tell you about the next events. We don't send out too many mailings. We try not to harass people. But next month is Kathy Engel, and the month after that is JP Howard, and we're just gonna keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
And Anton, I know this is a challenging environment to present, so we're very appreciative to everybody for logging on, as EJ said. So we'll see everybody soon. Thank you.
Yeah. See you next month.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.